you're listening to Discovery Debrief. And so did I. It's Jason Isaacs, who was, at some point, some version of Captain Lorca. Right now, I'm just a fan.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Discovery Debrief, a podcast setting a course to discuss the future of the final frontier in Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek PICARD, Lower Decks, and more. I'm co-host Chris Clow, and I'm joined by our bold panel of Star Trek franchise explorers, including Rachael Clow.
Oh, hello.
Hello. Zaki Hasan.
Permission to come back aboard.
Granted. Damn yes, granted. And the legendary Cicero Holmes.
Hey guys, I'm just trying to find my voice.
I think you found it, man.
Yeah.
I think you did.
I'm trying to find your voice too, Cicero.
Yeah, exactly. May I just say how much, one, I am so glad, and I'm sure, Chris, I'm stealing some of your thunder. I'm so glad that the entire group, our entire bridge crew is here. And on top of that, it makes me smile so brightly to hear Jason Isaacs at the beginning. That bumper,
right,
is so incredible,
dude.
It's
surreal.
So great. It's so great.
It really is. No, I don't like to I don't think I'm going to throw that ahead of every episode, but damn, I am tempted to.
It feels good, man. It feels good.
Does. It really does. No, it's awesome. And of course, yeah, I'm really happy to have the four of us that started this whole thing off back together. I mean, Dave is a great guest. I love having Dave, but Zaki, I mean, he is your relief so far, and we have missed you. So I'm glad.
I appreciate that. I've been teaching during the summer session, which really it pays my bills, so I'm grateful for it. But it also kicks my ass, so it significantly reduces my podcast time. But yesterday was the last day of summer for me, so I'm just walking on sunshine right now.
Excellent. So you get a little bit of a summer vacation. So
I get 2 weeks, and then it's right back into the grinder.
There'll be 7 episodes of debrief in the next 2 weeks.
I know. Like, so what happened this morning, guys?
Well, hey, I mean, we'll try to get in what we can. We have a little bit of a complication on our end, unfortunately. But, since there's not a regular show going on right now, I hope that people don't expect us to jump in every single week, but we'll absolutely bring you more debrief whenever we can, especially when we can get this whole crowd together. So this episode, as we talked about, represents the return of our full panel for the first time in a couple of months. And since we discussed the torrent of news to come out of Comic-Con International in our last episode, today we're turning our attention to the signature Trek event of the year, the official Star Trek convention that took place earlier this month in Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, though, we're going to ease into our discussion by talking about what everyone's been up to since the last time we all got together. And we have to start with a broader catch-up with Zaki. So, Zaki, we know that you've been busy making bacon, or making the money, right? Bringing the bacon home.
Right.
So what else have you been up to, man? First of all, if I understand you've restarted your Trek Order rewatch, but also I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this show about all the news that came out of San Diego and the PICARD trailer. So lay it on us. Please start us off.
Oh my goodness. What a time. It feels like 1994 or something, right? There's just so much Trek happening. I saw the trailer for PICARD, and I can't even sum up what I felt watching it. It's you're seeing a friend, you're reunited with a friend who you never thought you'd see again.
Yeah.
You had made your peace with, well, we had a great time together, and I'm just that time is over, and that's fine. And then here he is back again, and it's so. I love this moment before PICARD drops because it's just anticipation,
Yeah.
The similarity I would draw to is like, it's like seeing the first trailer for The Force Awakens. And at that moment, you have no idea what the sequel Star Wars movies are going to look like. And so you just get to luxuriate in all the excitement and anticipation. And that's what this is, I'm expecting to like it, but there's time for all the, I was hoping it'd be like this. Oh, they did that. I guess, there's time for all that later, and it'll probably happen in some way, shape, or form. But right now, let's just enjoy it. Let's enjoy this moment.
Very well said. And, well, I'm glad to hear that you are enjoying the moment. As far as your rewatch goes, how active has that been? If it's been active,
it has been active.
Right.
Like the crew of the Voyager, I'm making best possible speed towards home. So,
let's hope it doesn't take you 8 years.
Right, exactly. I'm into the first season of Voyager. The last episode of that we watched was, I think it's called State of Flux, which is where the character Seska is revealed to be an unsavory sort. And I'll tell you, I mean, I watched. That might be up to the episode that I watched of Voyager during its initial airing. And then I just dropped off, and not because I was like, oh, this show sucks. I just stopped, and I'm watching it now. And the truth of it is that over the course of the last 20 plus years, that narrative of, oh, Voyager sucked. And, there's that narrative that's baked in the cake in certain corners of fandom. And just, I'm going to plead guilty and say to some extent, I bought into that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was never like, oh, this show sucks, but it was never on my, it was not on my list of like, oh, I got to make sure I do that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And then during the course of my watch of TNG with my boys, and then I was like, oh, and we're going to do Deep Space Nine. They were like, well, are we going to do Voyager? And I was like, well, I don't have a good reason not to do Voyager because I'm not going to I don't want to prejudice them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I, when I talked to Brandon Braga a couple of years ago, when he was referring to Enterprise, he said, what I always tell people about Enterprise, people who've never given it a chance, is if you like Star Trek, here's 100 Star Treks you've never seen.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll like some, maybe you won't, but there's a lot of Star Trek you haven't seen. And I was like, well, that's Voyager, right?
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I've just been really enjoying it. I've been enjoying going back and forth, watching both, and they are so different. And it's just been a great experience. I think these characters are really fun. I think, at least thus far, I think the narrative that has existed, and I couch that by saying I know that that's not the predominant narrative, but there is, you guys know this, there is sort of that out there in the fan ether, like, oh, this is like one of the weaker ones. I'm like, you know what? It's good to me. I like it.
Yeah. Well, the thing that immediately comes to mind as far as a modern comparison is concerned, and feel free to tell me if you guys agree or disagree with this, but it's like in 2014, when you went into the theater to watch Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and then you returned a couple months later to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, like two totally, completely different tones that define those works, but they're concurrently running and they take place in the same shared world.
Yes.
And Star Trek put that to the test well before a lot of other things did, and when shared universes were in vogue. And I think that especially the competing tones of Voyager and Deep Space Nine make it fun to shift between the two.
I agree. And what I've, and maybe I've discussed this with you guys before, but watching it with my kids has been so illuminating for me.
Sure.
because it illustrates some of the wisdom of the thing that many people have criticized Roddenberry's utopianism about, which is, these are perfect characters and they're so upright and whatever. And that's always been the thing, like, oh, how do you get drama in there? And that's, there's validity to that. But then, just this Voyager that I watched just the other day, I forget what it's called, but it's where they have the opportunity to get this like space folding device.
Right. Yes.
Yes. the episode ends with, a couple of the characters acquiring this thing, and it nearly blows the ship up, but they prevent that from happening. And they have the opportunity to just be like, all right, hey, let's just delete this from the data and we'll pretend nothing happened. No one has to be the wiser. And B'Elanna is like, no, we're going to tell the captain what happened. We did this. We're going to own it. Right. And then Tuvok kind of jumps in on that too. And my point is, after that episode ended, I got to have a conversation with my kids about that. I was like, look at that. Do you see that? That's what it means to show character. Even when you have the opportunity to just wash your hands clean, you do the right thing. You do the right thing when it's hard, not when it's easy,
right.
Yeah. And who knows if these seeds that we're planting will take root the way we hope. But I'm glad I have the opportunity through this vehicle to hopefully show my kids what it means to be the best version of themselves.
Is that I think that was Eye of the Needle.
That's right.
That was the name of that was the title of that episode.
Excellent.
Nice. There you go.
Well, hey, I mean, it's still fresh in Cicero's. We all have, I think, kind of an interesting relationship with Voyager, just because. I wrote it off personally until I sat down and watched it all the way through, and then Cicero watched the whole thing recently. And Rachel, you kind of like it, but you've never been overly.
I love Janeway.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Like the rest of it, sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I think I'm probably due for a rewatch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Cicero, it is Prime Factors, by the way.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, because it's about the Prime Directive. And yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was episode 9.
Well, and I mean, the stuff that it brought to the table was important. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with the way that show treated the Borg.
Sure.
But we also got 7 of 9 out of it, and we're about to get more.
Right.
There you go.
There you go.
So, I mean, it left an impression on the franchise. And like you said, if it's Star Trek you've never seen, then it's a whole bunch of Star Trek that's new to you.
Right.
And there ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, you're over here convincing me, Zaki. I'm like, God, I've seen it so long. I probably don't remember most of it. I do.
I'll be honest. It's been, I've been racking my brain thinking about what it was back in the 90s that made me drop off. And I've just, and I don't know, but I'm like, was it because I just didn't want to watch a show with a female captain? Was that me? I hope not, and I'm like going through this. I'm like racking my own feelings for all of this because I'm like, there was no reason for me to stop watching it.
I think there may have been some Star Trek fatigue because
that's entirely possible.
Yeah, because it was, TNG totally revitalized everything. DS9 at the time was so very divisive. Immediately kind of shunned by people that were, true fans because they weren't going anywhere. It wasn't a spaceship, blah, 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 all of those things. And then, TNG bled into DS9 and then Voyager bled into DS9. I think by that time, because people weren't over the moon, just at the surface with what Star Trek was, I think there was a little bit of fatigue, much like, and to the chagrin of the showrunners of Voyager, and obviously history has proven them right to kind of go on the path that they went, much like the unjustly maligned Star Wars story Solo. And I think that, I think people were very kind of, The Last Jedi was very divisive, and them releasing Solo 6 months after that very divisive film, led to some people having a bit of, negative feelings, general malaise, towards the Star Wars franchise. And I think that affected Solo much more than what you actually saw on film, because I thought it was fine. I thought it was a fun movie. The performances were great. I think especially.
I think it's also that
go ahead.
For Solo, it's the casual fans, right? Like or casual people did not go to see Solo. Like at work, I'm around a lot of people who are not like Star Wars fans, and they're like, "There's a Star Wars movie out?" Like they didn't know about it, right? And I mean, that's a thing with franchise fatigue too. Is like they're like, "But didn't I just see that?" Like if their Star Trek is on, multiple nights a week too, it's the same thing. Like, that's always on.
Right.
And like,
there is a comparison to be drawn. I mean, it's kind of weird to think about it, but I think it's true. Star Wars is kind of in its infancy as like this multimedia juggernaut that Disney is making it out to be. Not that Star Wars was never a juggernaut, but it was before it was just the movies.
Right. Movies and action figures.
There's going to be more
else,
TV. Right. Yeah. And, animated and live action TV coming out. And this is all territory that Star Trek has trodden before, except for animation. But it had animation before.
Right.
Yeah. And, we'll have to see if it kind of hits the same sort of pitfalls. Star Trek has also had theme park attractions before Star Wars did. So it's weird to think about how Star Wars is starting to catch up, even though, like, as far as the popularity is concerned.
You know what? And actually, that's actually kind of poignant that we're talking about that, because I think that there is. I'm hoping not. But I think with the slate of shows that the showrunners from, that the holders of the Star Trek franchise are trying to push out right now on CBS All-Access, there is the potential for Star Trek fatigue. With
phase 2.
Yeah.
Star Trek fatigue phase 2.
Right, exactly. where there are, we've got one show that's running that's, about to approach its third season. We've got a new show from a beloved character that's starting its first season. And we've already got 2 other shows announced, above and beyond that, with the hope, at least on this show, that there will be another show starring Pike and Spock and Number One and the adventures of 1701.
Well, but of course, the key difference is that for the new Star Trek TV shows that are coming along, we have to actually buy into them.
Yes, that is correct. Well, you got to buy a ticket.
Which is going to be the case for Star Wars,
right? You got to buy a ticket to see Star Wars
when the Mandalorian comes along, but. It'll just be interesting to see the path that's ultimately charted from all of this. But we do have a lot of news stuff to talk about. So, Zaki, again, welcome back.
Thank you.
But I think we are going to move ahead to talk about everything that's come out news-wise in the Star Trek franchise over the past couple of months, or over the past month, rather, particularly as it relates to Star Trek Las Vegas. So we want to start things off, of course, with Star Trek PICARD. The news that started to come out for PICARD actually predated the Las Vegas convention. And Jonathan Frakes, who was promoting his upcoming appearance at Star Trek Las Vegas, gave an interview with IGN where he talked about both he and Deanna Troy's return to the Star Trek universe. And the thing that I found most interesting about what he had to say is that Rachel just pointed at an ad that totally took my concentration.
It says time travel through the Bible. What does that mean?
I don't know. Let's talk about something better.
It's the voyage home.
But anyway, one of the things that really caught my attention was what Jonathan Frakes had to say about where we pick up Riker. And I was actually kind of nervous. I was like, I hope they don't do something weird and cynical, like have them divorced and, like obsessed with their careers or something. But Jonathan Frakes said, the stuff is great. I can't obviously tell you, but Marina and I, well, you'll see where we are. We're together and it's quite non-military. I'll say that. And I find that really interesting because, honestly, one of the questions that came up in my mind, because we've always seen Riker is like a career first guy. I mean, that's what drove him away from Deanna Troi the first time they were together. Right. And the idea that he and his now wife have been able to move on from Starfleet. First of all, now we know why Picard didn't go to Riker for help with whatever he's trying to get done in this show. But I wonder how a retired lifestyle is going to fit for Will Riker. Rachel, what do you think?
I think they have a bunch of kids.
Yeah?
Yeah. They live on a farm.
Bunch of little Rikers running around.
Yeah. I think that's what he's very non-military. I don't know. To me, that just like.
Oh, so that means like domestic.
Yeah, like I was thinking, they probably have some kids and stuff, and
I think the world could use some Rikers and Troys. Yeah. Probably. Yeah. Well, it's an interesting idea. Cicero, what do you think about a post-military Riker Troi family?
I think the Troi Rikers are running a hedonism compound. And yeah, so that is more why Picard didn't seek out Riker, is because they're bohemians now, and
organs hanging from the ceiling.
Yes,
right?
Yes, exactly. And they no longer wish to act aggressively towards people unless it's in the bedroom.
Excellent. Well, I mean, Zaki,
engage.
Full speed ahead.
Make it so, right?
Zaki, or maybe more appropriately, per Captain Pike, hit it.
Right. Oh, perfect. We missed this. We really did. But Zaki, like all good things, positioned Riker as an admiral, which is around the same time as where we're picking things up in Picard. What do you think of the idea of a retired Will Riker who may not have even made it to the Admiralty for all we know?
Well, and I mean, from what Frake says, he's like it's non-military. So I like the idea of him being retired from the service, but not retired from life. And I do like the idea of something we've never seen in any iteration of Star Trek with our characters is what is life like once you hand in your comm badge?
Yeah.
Right. Sure. And that's something that's appealing to me just in terms of the landscape of this universe, which is, when you think about it, we've never gotten this far in their personal chronologies.
Yeah, the closest I think we've seen is when Admiral Kirk forcibly recalled Leonard McCoy, who was pissed about it, if memory serves correctly.
And then 100+ years later, he's still active duty.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So once he came back, he stayed in.
They keep pulling me back in.
Poor McCoy.
So tired.
He's so very tired.
Well, I mean, it'll be interesting, and that's not to say that because we never really had any indication about what Deanna Troi's ultimate lifetime aspirations were. Like, she obviously took her job very seriously, but we never really, she didn't really talk all that much outside of, when that alien baby grew very rapidly, and ultimately died. Any sort of motherly aspirations or familial aspirations. But, I think it should be really interesting to see, just the fact.
I do, Chris, I do like that they're not Force Awakensing it by having them broken up. And I think I don't think anybody wants that.
No.
I think we want Troi and Riker to get together, and it's smart to lean into that and not subvert expectations.
So I've actually got two non-jokey speculations about what they're doing. The first is, what if they dove into politics? And now we've seen ambassadors floated around all over the place, but we've never really seen our characters involve themselves in galactic politics in a real way. And
that's a good idea.
What does that mean in the 24th century?
What
how does that happen? What are the votes? What is the actual political process, like? So that would be interesting to me. And it gives them a large breadth to kind of, do lots of different things with those characters and within the canon.
See, now you're speaking my language, Cicero, because I've spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about the governmental structure of the United Federation of Planets.
Yeah, well,
and
Go on.
I think my wife would react the same way if I said something like
Go on.
So,
continue.
what we know about the structure of the Federation government is that there is a head of state, but it's primarily led by a council, by a Federation council,
Right.
Which is divorced entire. So the civilian government and the military are not intertwined. There is a separately appointed commander-in-chief of Starfleet who operates in a separate capacity from the Federation president. What you say, it occurs to me that having Riker or Troy as members, or one of them as a member of the Federation Council, could be really interesting if they decided to have, like a post-Starfleet life that was still in some kind of governmental service.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, it's definitely non-military.
Yeah.
that. The phrasing is very specific, Cicero. That's you saying that. I'm like, how did I not think of that?
Yeah.
The other non-jokey speculative thing that I was thinking about was academia. Here are two people that have been in leadership positions, and as we sit here and talk with a great professor, there is no greater leadership of young minds than a professor. That they can help shape the future, and it could be, you could be doing academic stuff, Professor Riker, who is the professor of, tactics and strategies and what have you. I mean, he's got a hell of a resume for that stuff. And who better to run your, psychological ward or wing or, school of psychology than a Betazoid, the Betazoid, right? So those are two ideas that popped into my head.
I think those are really good ideas. I'd be very interested to see because the first thing that came to my head was just something that was far quieter than that, but there's no reason to think why they couldn't be doing either of those things. Huh. But well said, Cicero. I'll be really interested to see what happens with that. The next little news item I wanted to touch on with you guys, especially for our resurgent Voyager observers. Speaking at the London Film and Comic-Con in late July, the Trekkie Girls podcast caught up with Robert Picardo. And what does that have to do with Picard? Well, he said this, quote, "I am pleased that CBS have expressed interest in me. They've reached out to my agent about next season. So I'm looking forward to see what it is. As you know, I play two characters, primarily the Doctor, but also Louis Zimmerman, who is the father of the Doctor's holographic matrix. So the Doctor or Louis Zimmerman or both could be in the cards for Picard season 2. Cicero, I don't really know too much about what your perspective is on the character of the Doctor specifically. So what do you think of the idea of him showing up in the very late 24th or early 25th centuries?
My absolute favorite character from Voyager.
Oh, really? Okay.
Is the Doctor. Yeah.
Excellent.
Without question, his arc is the thing. Like, if I go back and watch Voyager, it will be from the perspective of the Doctor. Like, his is the arc that I think his growth throughout the course of the series was the greatest. Of the people there, I think he was the best actor with a capital A, and and the stories that featured him specifically were far and away the if you have a top 10 list of Voyager episodes, 8 of them will be episodes that featured the Doctor. So yeah, so I hate this idea. I hate it. Kill it with fire.
And what do you? I'm struggling to think, but I have no reason to believe that Zimmerman wouldn't be a part of it in some capacity. Would you prefer just the Doctor, or would you like to see Louis Zimmerman again?
I mean, one of the great things about Robert Picardo is his ability to compartmentalize his performances.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that that was the thing that really made the Doctor great and made him as an actor on that show great, was that he could play the same character 17 different ways.
Right.
And each one was distinct and believable. So, I could definitely see both characters potentially, making their way. And the thing about it is the EMH that was on Voyager, and maybe we do get the EMH that was on Voyager. Since we're getting 7 who was on Voyager, maybe that's the one that we get. And, maybe we also do get Dr. Zimmerman. But maybe we get Dr. Zimmerman and a different EMH, and so like, I'm here for it. Whatever it is. Bob Picardo was on an episode of, The Orville.
That's right.
And he was fantastic on that as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'm just happy to see him, back in space.
Also had a pretty solid, memorable appearance as Dr. Zimmerman on Deep Space Nine too, which is always fun to watch. But Rachel, the Doctor, you seem to enjoy the Doctor when we have revisited episodes of Voyager. Do you think you'd like to see him show up in Picard?
Yeah, absolutely. I always like the characters that are trying to be people.
Sure, yeah.
They're like learning how to be human.
Which is different for the Doctor because he comes from a more like human-like template than someone like Data, Spock, or Odo.
Yeah, that's true. He's more like he's trying to get other people to see him as a full human. I think he already feels like he is.
Right.
It was, I think the arc between, or the way that Bob Picardo and Jerry Ryan played off of each other in later seasons of Voyager really kind of played to that point that you're making right now, Rachel, where they both were trying to, where it was basically the hologram teaching the human how to be human.
Yeah. And
both of them were going out into the rest of the crew trying to show that they were just as human as everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very true. Well said. Zaki, at the point you're in Voyager right now, I think the Doctor is just annoyed that he's staying on for too long. But given your perspective just on the wider universe and what you do know about both the Doctor and Dr. Zimmerman, what do you think about this?
I think anything in this new show that acknowledges and extends sort of the tendrils to what has happened before is all good. It's all gravy. I think we all, I think going in, when the show was first announced, I had my questions of like, how connected is it going to be? So when you watch this trailer and you're like, oh, well, there's 7 and there's Hugh Borg, and then you're like, oh, and Riker's going to be back, and there's Data, and there's, and you get to say, oh, see, the tapestry that is Star Trek continuity is something that pays forward and backwards, So this is a show that gets to carry the ball forward while still getting our neurons firing by making us remember all those other things that we love. So I don't want it to be like the Trek guest star of the week.
Right. Cheers.
But I love
Cheers.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I like that the option exists.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very well said. Well, let's move along to potentially the most shocking inclusion of the Comic-Con trailer that dropped in Data. At least for me it was. I don't know about you guys, but speaking to the Las Vegas Review Journal before Star Trek Las Vegas, Brent Spiner said this about his part in Picard. He said, Data makes appearances in the show. I can say that. And Data is a story point in this season as well. But I'm not in every episode. I'm not a major character on the show. And what that indicates to me is that he's still dead, and that there's something, whether it's in Picard's own mind or whether the memory engrams of Data survived into B4 and are preserved in some other capacity. I don't know if Data has physical form except for when he is being looked at potentially by Picard, because he would go on to say at his Star Trek Las Vegas panel that the only person he's played scenes with on set is Patrick Stewart. So what do you guys think about this? Did you think that the return of Data was a long shot already? And what do you think of potentially getting Data, if not as a fully fledged corporeal character, just to have his place on the show like this? Zaki?
Any way we can get Brent Spiner on here is fine with me. I do think I'm fairly certain it's like a holodeck thing. And I think if the only part that makes me curious about is whether that in essence decanonizes the stories that we've seen taking place in the interim, which sort of show that Data, that B4 like becomes Data,
Yeah, that's true. That EU stuff is always so fluid. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Rachel, you love Data. Did you hope that maybe he would be back in a fully fledged capacity, or are you okay with however Brent Spiner plays him again?
I guess because of my exposure to the EU stuff in my mind, I had just undone his death anyway. So it's like, like he goes into B4.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no problem. That's probably kind of a large logical leap for the show to make for a character that's not a main character.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I agree that he's probably some sort of hologram or hallucination or dream or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But then why does he have Before's body? Like, why did
the doctor played by Alison Pill opens that drawer, and there is a physical Soong type android in that drawer disassembled.
Yeah, well.
Or could they be the fragments of Data recovered from the wreckage of the scimitar? Probably not, because
hey, you want to see Data's body? Here it is.
Y'all want to see Data's body?
Anybody got a flashlight and a couple of shovels? Yeah, but that's true. Well,
anyway, I agree with Zaki. I'm fine with however we get to see Brent Spiner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Cicero, seeing Data again, how do you feel about it?
So a few years ago, there was a video game by Warner Brothers called Batman Arkham Knight.
I know where you're going with this, yeah.
And in this game, the Joker appears prominently, but it turns out, spoiler alert for Arkham Knight, great game though, by the way, is that early on you find out that the Joker is actually just a machination of Batman's mind.
Yeah.
And he is communicating, the Joker is communicating, and basically is the id for Batman throughout the entirety of the game. That would be very interesting to see if there is some kind of conflict, to see how Data plays into that, and what that does to Picard and how Picard deals with those things. That would be a really, really cool storytelling technique, I think. What I'm most interested in finding out is what they do with the makeup for Data, for Brent Spiner, because it's been 20 years.
A long road.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It has been a long road for Brent Spiner. And while I have seen him in other films since the last time I saw him as Data, I would say that he definitely does not look like the Data that we remember. in all of that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how they de-age a character who is not supposed to age.
Well, Data actually does age, though. The TNG said that, but that was, he also died 20 years ago. So, right. You know, whatever form that takes he's going to look different. And the glimpse that we caught of him in the PICARD trailer, he doesn't look the same. He doesn't look, I'm not saying he looks bad or anything, but he does not look the same. There is a notable difference, particularly in like even the shape of his irises, and his skin does seem a little less human than it did even during the heyday of the show. But it should be really interesting. He also said at his Star Trek Las Vegas panel, "I'm delighted to be a part of the show, and all I am is a part of the show. I want to make it semi-clear because I don't want to make it too clear that I am not a regular on the show. Data did die at the end of Nemesis, but I am on the show. I do make appearances. Data's story is a part of the thread of the show." And, you know, obviously we can't read too much into that, and I'm fine with not really knowing what the full details are concerning Data's return. But the fact of the matter at the end of the day is that we get more Data when before I think a lot of us thought, as Zaki alluded to at the top of the show, we didn't really think that was possible. And the fact that we do get to see him is great. And I like, too, that Brent Spiner answered a fan question about how long it took him to get back into the mindset of the character, because that's honestly something I've wondered about, too. He's always been like the most flippant cast member. He seems like the funniest cast member of The Next Generation. And I was just kind of curious about how he finds that place again. And he said that it took less time than it took him to get into the makeup. He said it really kind of came back. It really was sort of, with Patrick and I sitting there looking at each other, it came back really quickly. But the last thing he said that I wanted to run by you guys particularly, because we have talked off and on about varying feelings that we have about 2002 Star Trek Nemesis, and not all of them are positive. Surprise, surprise.
I always try to hold my tongue because someday we're going to do like a whole discussion of it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think that'll be fun. But so Brent Spiner said this at his panel. He said, "I really liked Star Trek Nemesis. I co-wrote the story with Rick Berman and John Logan. Tom Hardy was fantastic as Shinzon. I think there were things that don't work about it, but in general, looking back, it is a more satisfying film than you remember. There was a lot of disappointment because the guy, Data, was killed." But he also quickly conceded that obviously First Contact was the best Next Generation movie. He said there's no way around it. Ron Moore and Brandon Braga wrote a great script, and Jonathan Frakes really rose to the occasion on directing. But just briefly before we move on, and I'm going to start with Zaki, who I think is the most ardent critic of Nemesis. A more satisfying film than you remember. Thoughts?
I do have thoughts on this, actually, because as it happens, I just rewatched Nemesis just a couple weeks ago.
Really?
By chance, yeah. It's not a good movie. I think I want to put that right on Front Street. However, to me, Nemesis now feels a little bit like X-Men: The Last Stand, where what irked me about both, and actually the Patrick Stewart connection didn't occur to me until literally just a second, but what irked me about both of those films was the way it was forced to become the ending of this story that deserved a better ending, or at least had some more room to go, right? And so that was always the context in which I viewed Nemesis, which I thought has some really good moments. You know, I think Picard's toast to Riker is terrific. I think when he's talking to Shinzon and he's talking about how, you know, did the Starfleet captain here in the Romulan Senate, what a moment, you know, it's great stuff. I think the director, what's his face, Stuart Baird, he chopped the guts out of that thing. When you look at the deleted scenes, I mean, those are the heart and soul of that movie. That's the stuff that the fans would have wanted, right? And so it's this weird thing where it's like, well, it is a deeply imperfect thing, but now knowing that the Next Generation saga is continuing in some way, shape, or form, you get to look at Nemesis and say, well, it's more like a little bump in the road. It's not the end of the road. It's a speed bump.
That is a new perspective that is only just now possible.
Yeah. So as by way of corollary, there was a moment where back in the late 80s where the Final Frontier was going to be the last Star Trek movie. Right. And I have a feeling that movie, which is not beloved by any stretch, I think it would be hated even more if it in fact was.
Yes.
Right. But they got to come back and, go out with their boots on. And so you look at 5 and you're like, well, it's a chance to hang out with these friends that we love. And I think that's Nemesis. It's like, well, it's one more chance. And is it their best one? No. But, there's
of course,
others.
the key difference being between Star Trek 5 and 6, 2 years elapsed. And this December marks the 17th anniversary of Star Trek Nemesis. But who's counting?
Well, they got there eventually. That's
but I think that's a really good point. I can't imagine how I would feel about Star Trek V, particularly if they never made my favorite film in the franchise. So, very, very well said. Very well said. Anybody else have any thoughts on Nemesis they want to share?
Yeah. I'll just say quickly that whenever you're working on a project, there are things that are on the page that don't make it to the screen. There are things that aren't even on the page that you glean insights about because the creators are there explaining those things to you. And that innately gives you a greater appreciation for the project for which you're working than the layperson, than the consumer. Unless everything that was given to you is then translated onto whatever the medium is. And so I think from that perspective, Brent Spiner's perspective about Nemesis is always going to be more reverential than ours. Just because he knows more about what they were trying to do than we do. So I mean, like you kind of have to take his defense of it, and I know this is kind of tongue in cheek, but his defense of Nemesis, you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, because he was privy to more about what they were trying to do and what each scene meant than we were.
Yeah. I mean, he was an architect of the story in Nemesis. So yes, absolutely. I think the point is very well taken. It is natural that he would care more about it. Well said.
All right, so it's been a while since I've seen Nemesis, but isn't there... Shinzon does something to Troy in it, right?
It's kind of a mind rape, yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I, physically hate it so much that I don't want to ever watch the movie.
I understand
it just bothers me so much.
It was a different time, Ray.
Seriously... You watch that, watching it now from 2019, I'm just like, how in the universe did anyone think this was a good idea, right? And it tells me it's like, I can't imagine that Marina Sirtis was okay with it. And it told me it's like nobody cared to listen to her.
Yeah, it's just that for me, there are so many other problems with it, but for me makes it that's a single thing that I'm I don't want to watch this.
I understand that. I do. I mean, when I think of the moments that I like out of that movie, that is not the thing that even comes even close to my mind.
It makes my skin crawl, the whole thing.
That's understandable. Yeah. No, it was not a good moment. Absolutely. Misfire, Mr. Baird. I still respect you because you edited Superman the movie, but come on, man. That wasn't cool.
Well, he should stick to editing. I mean, he should. I mean, look, the movies he's directed have generally been not very good. I mean, it's just no doubt he's skilled as an editor, but U.S. Marshals is the sequel to Fugitive, and it's friggin' awful.
Yeah. Maybe that's Wesley Snipes. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean Lawrence Fishburne?
Oh man. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Oh, man.
Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man.
I need to clarify this
Yes.
because if somebody's listening to this out of
Yes.
context, they'll be like, "What the hell, Zaki?" So there was a thing on Hollywood Reporter yesterday talking about how Wesley Snipes is appearing in the sequel to Coming to America, and the little hype blurb from Hollywood Reporter says the Matrix star is joining the Coming to America sequel.
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about, do you remember it was a local news report where someone was talking to Samuel L. Jackson?
Yes.
And they called it, or they basically confused him with Lawrence Fishburne, and he jumped down their throat, and it was beautiful. Like
yes.
Oh man, what is it about
Wesley Snipes?
As a black man who has been confused for many different people, some of who were in the same room with me at the same time, in eyesight of the person who was confusing us. Good for anyone who goes out and says something.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yes.
Wow. Well, after that bundle of joy, there's a couple other things that I want to run by you guys. First of all, Jonathan Frakes, on point. Pictures from his STLV panel. He's wearing a shirt that says, "Don't ask me, I signed an NDA," which I love.
Great
but
shirt.
he was also talking
Great
about so he is both directing and acting in PICARD. And he described when he and Patrick Stewart had shared a scene together, and I want to read it for you guys. So he says, "I will share this, just between me and you, in front of an entire crowd. I did play one scene with PICARD already. I won't tell you anything about it except this. At the end of the scene, we were in 3 different locations. Doug Aronofsky, I think that's how you say his name, the director said, I have to go on to the next set and I will leave you guys here with a camera drone. So the drone comes and shoots. The 2 of us play the scene, and off in the woods is somebody with Patrick's chair and the second assistant director and Alex Kurtzman. And Patrick says, I think we've done it, Johnny. And I said, I think so too. So we walk and it's just the 2 of us. The entire company of 150 people have moved on to the next set, which is in another part. And he says, is there anything better than spending the day with filmmakers who know what they're doing and be able to work with people you love? So it sounds like he's just relishing this. He also related earlier, and I don't want to read the whole quote, but he related some insecurity about the idea of bringing Riker back for the first time in 16, 17 years. And that's astonishing to me, just because I think Jonathan Frakes is a good actor, and maybe he just feels like he's a little out of practice. But man, I was already excited for PICARD, but I love the character of Will Riker so much that I just cannot wait to see him again. Whatever form he's in, I know that Frakes is going to knock it out of the park like he's done 1,000 times before. And I just wanted to share that before we move on. Excellent.
I concur.
Another interesting comment, though, came from Jerry Ryan, who said that she's glad that the cat suit, the infamous cat suit that she had to wear during her seasons on Voyager, is gone. But she had problems finding the voice again for 7 of 9, and she said, "I was freaking out. She was a very specific character for 4 years on Voyager. There was a lot of growth and all of that. She went from being a machine to learning to be human, but particularly the way she moved and her voice, that was what I was really hung up on. Her voice didn't change that much in 4 years. She had a very stilted, very formal, very stylized way of speaking at the end of Voyager. So when I got the initial script, and I knew from the original pitch a year and a half ago that she is not the same 7. She's much more human. She's been on Earth for a long time, and she's been through a lot. So when I saw that initial script, and as you saw the line, what the hell are you doing out here? It's a very different voice, and that was freaking me out." And she went on to describe how Jonathan Del Arco helped her through it, the actor who plays Hugh, by saying, well, maybe she's just trying to find a way to be human, and this is a 20-year culmination of her attempting to fit in. And for whatever reason, that's what clicked with her to find the new voice for 7. The thing that I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with Cicero just because he's the one who's watched the show most recently. You have 7 of 9 as a character who fills a very specific part in that show, a fascinating part for that back half of Star Trek Voyager. When you change her voice to the extent that it sounds like they're going to, does that take away too much from what we've seen before, or does it add a new dimension that could potentially be as satisfying as the person you knew all those years ago?
I think it's 100% that it adds something to the character. The last thing you want to see is, 20, 30 years into the future of this character that over the course of 4 years, you got to see grow exponentially. To think that she just wound up in some type of cryo chamber, and, some emotional cryo chamber. And when they popped her back out again, she was, exactly the same as she was then, despite all of the other influences she may have had over the course of those 20 odd years. Just doesn't make sense. It is very anachronistic. So the fact that she is going in and the character fundamentally is different with those same memories is part of the growth, is part of why we're tuning into PICARD in the first place, right? Is to see where these characters are now. And the last thing you'd want is for PICARD to have grown and to see Riker and Troy come in and they have grown, and all of these other characters, but then you bring in the one recovered Borg and she has not. Like, sure. That makes no sense.
Very well said. And I'm inclined to agree with you. Rachel, the evolution of 7 of 9, do you think that are you intrigued by this more human take on what she brings to the table now?
Yeah. Well, now I've heard this information, I'm interested to see what else she has in store for the voice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And that is a really difficult acting question because she doesn't change for 4 years. And then you're like, well, she has to change. So how do you make it still sound like her, but different? Mm-hmm. And I don't know how I would solve it because whatever clicked for her there did not click for me. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't understand, but I am no actor. So, so yeah, I'm looking forward to see what that interpretation is.
Well, on the panel stage, for what it's worth, Jonathan Frakes revealed how Patrick Stewart feels about working with Jeri Ryan. And Frakes said, I asked Patrick what it was like working with Jeri, and he said, she is marvelous, Johnny. She is so present. So, if nothing else, I think 7 of 9 was a very present character in her appearances. Yeah. Zaki, yes. How well developed is your perspective on 7 of 9?
I mean, I just know her as like the pinup fantasy that powered several pubescent Trekkies through their adolescence, right? Like what I've seen of her on the show is negligible, and no statement on Jeri Ryan's performance on the show because I've seen her in other things, but I know enough of 7 of 9 to know that she was definitely playing her a different way in this. I was actually hoping she would have gone even further into doing like a Jersey accent, like out of The Sopranos, just something completely incongruous, just to mess with people.
I need some gabagool.
I don't know the character, so all I can say is I'm glad that people seem to be excited to see her again. And if the level of people's complaint is that she's not wearing that painted on spandex number, then boo freaking who, right?
Yeah, I mean she's also like 55 now, so
you'd never know it by looking at her though.
Yeah. Right. Well, yes.
I was about to say, yes. Yeah. She hit the genetic jackpot.
Yeah. Well, what I will say also, Chris, is kind of pointing back to what I was saying before about receiving direction, getting information that's not necessarily on the page. These are, 7's portrayal in PICARD will be a departure from, who she was or who fans knew her to be on Voyager. And I wonder how that's going to play above and, outside of the fact that she's not wearing the same dumb outfit that she was wearing before. But like, the fact that she is going to have changed and grown, I wonder if fans not necessarily reject it, but will question it. Those fans who aren't as plugged in as we are here, that didn't hear the things that came out of Vegas over the weekend. I wonder how that stuff is going to play.
I do too. Well, before we move on to the next show, some other announcements that came out of Las Vegas. There's going to be expanded universe material that will precede Picard in the form of both tie-in novels and comics. So starting this coming November, IDW is releasing a series called Star Trek Picard Countdown, which is a title that hopefully portends good things considering previous series. It's a 3-issue mini that's written by Mike Johnson, who's been the primary writer on most of IDW's Star Trek stuff since 2009, I believe. And it's also being co-written by supervising producer Kirsten Beyer. Centers around a mission that would go on to change the life of the beloved Star Trek captain. So I kind of assume that it's going to be the attempt to save Romulus, but time will tell. And then following the conclusion of the IDW series, Simon & Schuster is going to be publishing Star Trek Picard, The Last Best Hope as a novel written by Una McCormick, who wrote the Star Trek Discovery tie-in novel, The Way to the Stars, that profiled Sylvia Tilly. So that should be interesting, and hopefully our panelists will read it and we can talk about it before Picard actually shows up. But let's move on to the whole reason that we got together in the first place, shall we? Star Trek Discovery. So Season 2 is going to be coming to Blu-ray on November the 12th, and shock and awe at their panel at Star Trek Las Vegas, Anson Mount, or at their panels, I should say, Anson Mount and Ethan Peck, they want to come back. We know that they're going to be back for some short treks that feature the crew of the Enterprise. And it's kind of obvious that they should come back. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed that they didn't actually announce that this show was happening at Star Trek Las Vegas. I was expecting some big production announcement to come out of this show, and unfortunately we didn't get that. But as for the idea of doing a shet, doing a shet. Been watching too much Love Island with Rachel. Oh no. As far as the idea of doing a show aboard the Enterprise with Ethan Peck as Spock and Rebecca Romaine as number 1, Anson Mount said, obviously it's something I would love to do. It was never on my bucket list because I never thought it is something that could be on my bucket list. It would be wonderful. I love the franchise and I love these people. And he went on to say that we'll see. There's a lot of things going on at the network right now and within the franchise, and these decisions have to deal with many, many things that float above my pay grade or even outside my realm of knowledge. I'm as up to date as you guys. And people just absolutely made their feelings felt concerning the desire for an Enterprise-based show. And Ethan Peck... excitement and magic he felt filming the season 2 finale for Discovery that took place aboard the Enterprise. And he said about his time as Spock, I was told about what would happen at the end of the season at a dinner I had with Alex Kurtzman and a bunch of the producers. And he took me through, and I remember being almost moved to tears because this has been such an emotional and incredible journey for me. And I was in the middle of the season, and just know that I was going to be a part of this sort of soaring narrative that ties into the canon, and being a part of that, it was surreal, like living a dream. And his enthusiasm for Star Trek still remains. Not too much of a surprise, but now that we've had some time to sit with the characterization that we absorbed in Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery for Captain Pike, for Spock, for number 1, and even for the recharacterization of the Enterprise to a degree, how do you guys feel about the possibility presented both by the short treks that we are going to get to see and the looming possibility of Star Trek 1701? Rachel, is that something that you want?
Oh, yeah, I'll watch the hell out of that. I just think it's interesting that Anson Mount was like, oh, no, I don't know. And now he's like completely changed his tune. He's like, I'll do it for 7 seasons. Like, okay. Did someone drive a dump truck full of money up to your house?
Or maybe he's just starting to get his residuals from
maybe
from
it's
stuff.
Like, I don't know. He just got married, right? Maybe.
Yeah, he did.
Maybe he's got some bills to pay.
But he does seem like he has a lot of affection for the character, too. I mean, of course, money is going to be a part of it for any actor that wants to work, but this character and the characterization of him,
right?
Not only is it connected with people, but he seems pretty gung-ho about it.
Yeah, I mean, probably more realistically, like I was kind of joking about the dump truck full of money, but realistically, I think when you have just finished shooting, actors can be sometimes like really exhausted and like,
yeah, true.
Like I know like Daniel Craig after the last James Bond movie was just like very salty. And, you know, once they get some perspective, they're like, oh, yeah, I could do that again. I could do that again. And, you know, and probably interacting with the fans and seeing the fan reaction to it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was part of it as well. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah. And those short treks, they're coming. We are getting more pike, just not as much as we would prefer to have coming down the pike. And Rachel, you just started The Enterprise War, the novel by John Jackson Miller. And how's that going so far?
It is going fine so far.
All right. Very good. Glad to hear it. Zaki, I think you've been pretty plain with your desire to see continuing adventures from this crew and aboard this ship even, which is a little bit of a different take than you had, I think, at the middle when we were talking about season 1 of Discovery, when we were still trying to kind of feeling out what its interactions in the 23rd century would be. But now that Discovery proper is so far away from the 23rd century, do you like this idea of potentially further exploring the lost decade between Discovery and TOS?
I mean, you've got that time period available to you. Canonically, it's just sitting there, and you've got a vehicle, no pun intended, with this version of the Enterprise. You know, so you don't have to do a lot of building out because it's already the legwork has already been done. We can look at season 2, the entire arc of season 2 as in effect the Pike pilot, right? So it, you know, as soon as Anson Mount stepped off that transporter pad, I was like, get that man a spinoff. I was like, T'Challa, get that man a spinoff, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's how quickly, you know, and I'm not the only one. Everyone had that exact thought. I mean, Anson Mount is just this charisma magnet. He's the type of actor who you center a show around. He was good on friggin' he was good on Inhumans and he didn't say anything, you know? Like, they woefully misused his talents, but he was really good on that show, which was not very good, you know? I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. They're doing a lot of pussyfooting around. I think it is for sure going to happen. The only question is when they announce it. And fingers crossed that it'll be called Pike's Place.
It would be really weird if they just called it Boardwalk for some reason. Star Trek.
Boardwalk.
Oh well. There you go.
Boardwalk.
Cicero, Star Trek 1701. Well, first of all, you know, we got the short treks coming, but you still have that appetite for more adventures aboard the Enterprise?
No, man. You know, once we watch these short treks, I'm done with these guys. So, yeah, I think Anson Mount is playing a little bit coy. He said he doesn't know any more than you guys do. Or than we do. I think he knows a lot more than that. And I think, you know, as Zaki said, it is a slam dunk. This is, look, they're not leaving money on the table. And that performance, the performance of at least, you know, Rebecca Romijn, I thought was, you know, in the short periods of time that they used her, Rebecca Romijn was great as number 1. But obviously Ethan Peck and Anson Mount were incredible. As their respective characters in Discovery season 2. So, I mean, they're not going to leave that money on the table. It's just, it would be ridiculous. So it's a guarantee that that's coming. I just think, at this point now, the writers, you know, maybe they're trying to hire writers or maybe they're going to repurpose some of the writers that they have, throughout the various writing rooms of the multitude of Star Trek shows that they have right now to try and figure out exactly what the stories will be, how, what type of, what the flavor and the tempo and the tune of the show is. It's like jazz, man. It's like jazz. And what that's going to be. And I think they're in the creation phase of that. And they're probably much further along, than we may give them credit for. I will put, any amount of money, $0 on the fact that we won't go 12 months without hearing something about a new show that should be called 1701. Because if it's not called 1701, it better be called Pike's Place.
Damn straight.
And if it is called 1701, I do want some creative points for that. But yeah, I mean, that is. So they announced a lot of stuff at Comic-Con this year. They followed it up with more information at STLV this year. The new adventures of the Starship Enterprise will be the headline of Comic-Con next year. And it would be, it's the perfect opportunity to go out there. You don't want to muddy the waters by talking about all of these things, especially if the show is not, is a year plus away. So I think that's what we're going to get to see. And,
well, I think that it's really interesting too, that the conversation has evolved from they can't touch the 23rd century to now craving more of the sort of remixed 23rd century, at least visually, like the fact that is what is drowning out what we thought was kind of a torrent of hatred over the concept of revisiting this era in the canon. I find that heartening, just personally, but,
yeah, and I think also if we continue to get shows in the 23rd century where the stylistic choices are more modern or make more sense with the larger budgets that they have, also the 50 years of technology that we've had in real time to make those things better, the easier it will be for those people that are holding out because of the visuals for them to come around and say, okay, well, this is the aesthetic now. And yeah, absolutely. I can see how that makes sense.
Well, the last major thing that I want to talk with you guys about, it comes from our close personal friend, Mr. Jason Isaacs.
Hope he doesn't.
Yeah. He opened the show and we closed it.
Yeah, right. Just kidding, Mr. Isaacs. Please. We're not worthy. So he had panel space with Anson Mount, and I wish I could have been there. I mean, obviously you guys have probably worked out. None of us were at Star Trek Las Vegas. Hopefully that will change soon. It's my hope and dream. I've always wanted to visit this show because the last time I was in Las Vegas for something Star Trek related, Star Trek The Experience was still in business. Oh, Lordy, and that was great. But so Jason Isaacs took the stage, and man, he is ready for Prime Lorca. He talked about, probably only doing one season, and someone asked him, do you want to come back? And what do you think he said? Of course he wants to come back. And
I don't even know why I'm here in Vegas.
But he also said that he has actually talked to Star Trek's producers. He says, I've talked to them plenty. Where and when? Nobody ever dies. There is a Prime Lorca. There are 3 different shows coming out in multiple seasons. And if I can squeeze back into that 8-year-old's uniform, would do. Who wouldn't want to do it again? They're timeless stories. And the thing that I found particularly interesting is he did share a little bit of a perspective on what Prime Lorca might look like. He said, the point about the mirror world we built is it wasn't meant to be how it was in Mirror Mirror, the original series episode. This was meant to be a Darwinian universe, just with a different political attitude that the strong should rule the weak. I don't think he would be that many miles away from Prime Lorca. It wasn't a coincidence that I sneaked the line in, let's make the Empire glorious again. It's about a different political attitude. I think Prime Lorca would be pretty much the same. Wow. I mean, honestly, that's kind of the characterization that Dayton Ward went with in the Drastic Measures novel. The only real time that we've seen Prime Lorca, and that's not conceivably canonical, but yeah, that wasn't all that different. Still pretty harsh.
Did Dayton know?
Yes,
Dayton know the dispensation of the character?
Yeah, he told us that he did. It sounded like it was a pretty cool experience. But yeah, I find it pretty interesting though, because really, when you look at mirror universe characters in the '60s, I don't know if it counts because they were purposefully more caricatures than characters. You know, where Mirror Kirk was screaming in the corridors of the Enterprise, "I order you, let me go, Spock, get this man off me!" You know, I mean, he was supposed to. I mean, my favorite one was, "All right, Spock, whatever you give me." You know, I love that
stuff. Bill, is it Shatner? Is he on our show?
But I mean, I think the closer element, besides looking at Discovery, of course, is looking how the characters were on Deep Space Nine, and most of the characters, barring like Intendant Kira, were not abundantly different from just their basic characterizations. Yeah, well,
but there's also
Enterprise pretty harsh, I suppose. But Lorca, I guess it just feels like it makes sense, first of all, because of who's playing him, and because, well, the crucible of what seems to form that guy seems like it's just pretty harsh in general. But what do you guys think about this? Would this get too close to what we've seen before? If we do get Prime Lorca somehow, whether it's in Discovery or whether it's in one of these other shows, because Zaki, of course, you were very critical of the Mirror Universe's invocation and Discovery. Do you want Lorca to be a totally different guy, or would you prefer something a little recognizable?
Well, I think, you know, before the mirror switcheroo, you know, what I kept coming back to is I admired not admired, that's the wrong word. I liked, you know, I savored the complexity of the character. I was like, how does a character like this with all this gray exist within a Starfleet framework? That was interesting to me. So when they're like, psych, he's evil the whole time, that was less interesting to me. But definitely you have to say, just extrapolating from what Mr. Isaac said, you say, well, here's a guy who, like Mirror Lorca, comes across and he takes the place of his counterpart to the extent that people who've known Lorca aren't like, hey, why are you acting all weird? Like, they're like, right, it had to be enough similarity where it's like, all right, well, that's a little weird, but that's Gabriel, you know. So I don't think he's wrong when he says, well, it would have to be just a difference of a few degrees. Those degrees matter. But I think that were we to get a Prime Lorca, he wouldn't be like Nebuchadnezzar Tapestry Picard, you know.
He's Bob Ross.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's going to be a little happy bush.
Here's some clouds
by the college station.
I mean, I'd like to think that it would be closer to what appealed to me about the character initially, which is he's a complex gray character.
So you think that stuff can stay the same if the skewing is, in his mind, the ideology of instead of the strong rule the weak, it's the strong protect the weak?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd be interested in that. You know, that I mean, look, Jason Isaacs knocked it out during that first season. He was great for, you know, from beginning to end. So anything that brings him back into the fold.
Well, another thing I want to share before I throw it to Rachel here, he talked about how he didn't want to sit in the captain's chair, and he said on his panel, I walked up and down, my rationalization being Lorca doesn't want to be there. He thinks they're a bunch of idiotic hippies who got this crazy idea of equality, and he just wants to go home to the mirror universe. But really, I just didn't want to sit in the chair and have the pictures to compare to previous Star Trek captains, which I thought was kind of funny. But I like the idea of a bunch of idiotic hippies because, yeah, that is kind of what Lorca thought in the back of his mind. Rachel?
Front of his mind. Front of it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, fair enough. Prime Lorca,
Front of his mind.
What do you think about that?
He's going to be on 1701 Pike's Place.
Look, if he's strong, like if he was displaced, like Dayton Ward's novel alluded to, he survived.
That would be a super cool guest appearance.
Yeah.
I think.
I agree.
Look, we're tossing out all kinds of free ideas.
Yeah, it's
today.
true.
So
There you go.
you're right.
Are they
CBS
free?
can write
Are
the
they?
check to Discovery Debrief.
Well,
Care
and,
of Discovery Debrief.
Isaac's also talked at his panel about having watched season 2, because the coolest thing about this panel that I'm so sad that I missed in person was that he and Anson Mount seemed to be forming a kind of bromance. And I love the idea of that. Like, he says that, oh, you got a better ready room than I did. Mine was a piece of shit. And and the way that he brings up Pike's characterization. He says, I love the second season of Discovery much more than the season I was in, not because it was better or different, but I didn't need to be self-conscious about myself in that weird costume. But I did think to myself, let's see how he gets on. Oh, he's really good. So annoying. But wait until it turns. It never turned. Just before it started, people were like, bring back Lorca, Prime Lorca. Then it was like, oh, Pike's good. Let's have a Pike.
We're gone forever.
By saying to everybody, you're so fickle. And I love that. But
Right.
even the people at Trek Movie wrote up a really great recap of their panel together. And they even say this is a comedy duo in the making. They had a lot of things to talk about, and Jason saying, like, how desperately uncomfortable that uniform is. It's been a year, and my balls have just dropped. But he also revealed that he stole his costume. And he said that he regretted not keeping any of his costumes as Lucius Malfoy in the Harry Potter series, but he also joked he only uses his Starfleet uniform for special nights.
Hey now.
Hit it.
At the Troy Riker compound.
But the funniest thing, I think, was people asked about a fight between Lorca and Pike, and Jason Isaac said, well, Lorca would fight dirty. That's the thing. Pike is a very virtuous, I would say quasi-Mormon-like captain. There's nothing wrong with being the Osmonds of Starfleet, but there's no Queensberry rules with Lorca. Clearly, Anson would take me with his little finger, but Lorca would fight very dirty. And I just wanted to share that with you guys because that sounds like a blast. But Cicero, what do you think of the idea of bringing Lorca back into the fold?
Shout out to Jason Isaacs, man. You've made a bumper, but if you could be guest, oh man, that would be great. So if Jason, if you're listening, hit us up at
please tell CBS to send money as well.
Right. I was at the end of season 1. I know, Chris, you were very, very much team Prime Lorca, and I was very much, that's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. I am now team it will happen. I mean, he was in Vegas, for crying out loud. So yeah, I mean, they're not going to bring a guy back that he was only on for a season and not bring him back onto one of the myriad shows that they're planning on CBS All Access. So so it is happening. Unlike Rachel, I don't think it'll be on 1701. I think it will be on Section 31.
Now that you mentioned
Yeah. I do think that there is, a lot of room. There's a lot of delicious stuff to play with him being on the Section 31 show and with Giorgio being there, and all of that stuff is something that we could wind up seeing. And then that does not preclude an appearance by the Enterprise on the Section 31, like some kind of goofy crossover episode or episodes, where, the third Section 31 crew is on, 1701 and vice versa. And having Lorca be the thing, the reason that happens.
Give me those 90s comics crossover, baby.
Sure.
I want it bad. Oh man.
Yes.
All I have to say is yum.
I mean, but just think about like the character dynamic of Georgiou's obviously going to be a major part of the Section 31 show, and this face comes back into her life that she associates with her most implacable enemy, but they're on the same side this time. That would be a lot of fun.
Or are they?
Fair enough,
Right.
fair enough. But I think it would be very interesting
Or
if
are
they
they?
were.
Yeah.
Just personally, but no, very well said. Well,
Sure.
before we actually close out, so just a couple of quick notes. Shahzad Latif basically says expect more news about Section 31 in a year. That doesn't sound unreasonable considering what we have to look forward to. We got some other information about Lower Decks, but nothing that was too revelatory considering what we saw out of Comic-Con. Something I think is really cool, next month, Star Trek The Motion Picture is coming back to theaters via Fathom Events, and I know I'm going to be there. Do you guys plan on seeing it in the theater?
I haven't seen that movie in 30 years, so yeah.
Hey, man.
So yeah, maybe I'll come down.
I would love that. I think it's on a Sunday and a Wednesday, so if you want to do the Sunday, let's do that. Zaki, is that something that entices you?
Any chance to
absolutely
watch the classic cast,
but also kind of interestingly, so this is the 40th anniversary year for Star Trek The Motion Picture, and the original novelization that's written by Gene Roddenberry is also getting re-released, as well as being released for the first time in an audiobook format that's going to be narrated by our old buddy Robert Petkoff, who's been doing a lot of the Discovery books, and that sounds like a pretty interesting time too. I remember wearing my paperback copy of that book out when I was a kid, and the idea of being able to revisit that sounds like a lot of fun, so we might have to talk about that. Anthony Rapp is going to be joining the new and I guess the final Discovery expansion for Star Trek Online, which makes sense. I mean, the guy loves games, the guy loves comics. Why not put him into the comics? But also something, Kelvin Timeline novels are going to start coming. And the first one that's coming out, which I believe is called More Beautiful Than Death by David Mack, has actually been written for 10 years and is just now being released.
Whoa.
So it was announced at Star Trek Las Vegas that More Beautiful Than Death is coming out in August of 2020. 10 years ago, he wrote it. It was set right after the 2009 movie showcasing the new characters and situations. And he said, for behind-the-scenes reasons unrelated to my work, my book and 3 others in that setting were abruptly canceled. So something has taken place that is pushing that stuff back out. That's cool.
The movies aren't coming back out. That's
I was about to say, yeah, that's what's
right. Yeah,
that's-
but hey,
that's
I mean,
what's taking place, exactly.
You know, we get more adventures, and the comic book series that was running is long gone. So I guess the thing that we have to look forward to is Kelvin-verse novels, which is an interesting idea. And Cicero, I remember you telling us on the chat line, and I didn't even see this until you mentioned it, but the director of the What We Left Behind documentary said that Avery Brooks is involved. Tell us about that.
He told him that he watched the DVD or the Blu-ray and watched the extra features, and I guess, man, what an amazing, like, amazingly just curiosity Avery Brooks must be, because basically what was said was, hey man, I dug it, and I'll watch it again. And that is like the highest praise from Avery Brooks, that not only did he like the thing that you did, but he'll watch it a second time. And of course, for those of you that have already seen What We Left Behind, Avery Brooks was only involved via archival footage from Captains. So he wasn't actually even he wasn't interviewed for whatever reason directly for What We Left Behind. And so it was very interesting to hear his take on it. And I think, it makes me happy to know that he really enjoyed it.
Felt he said all he wanted to say, but he did offer them notes on stuff that was included. So he was even
What a
involved
dude.
for some degree in a production capacity. But the fact that he likes it, it has Captain Sisko's seal of approval. That's awesome. But the final thing that we're going to talk about is something that we haven't done in a while, and that is opening up the whole,
Have a show?
Yes, I got it. We're opening up the old communicator. So this question comes from Edward Sanders. He says, could you all maybe talk about what all the corporate behind-the-scenes recent stuff with CBS and Viacom, how it might affect the future of the franchise? So we were talking a little bit off mic before we started recording, just a little bit about the climate at CBS and how it seems that they've actually decided on a corporate leadership team for whatever this new corporation is going to be. And, you know, corporate news is boring. And of course, these big blobs are going to find ways to blob together, even if, you know, they lose $5 billion on their stock, like it just got announced that Uber did this morning, but they're going to keep on going, I'm sure. But so CBS and Viacom, they've actually agreed on something. Star Trek has been cited as a reason for them to get back together. Finally, of course it should be. It should have been a long time ago, but anyway. So we were talking a little bit about just what the popularity of CBS All Access looks like. What do you guys think of the possibility for this actually taking place? Because it's looking like it's going to be increasingly possible. Today was the target date to finalize a deal, but there wasn't anything that was announced today. We're recording this on August 8th. But it looks like they're actually looking at Star Trek as a major reason why this should actually go through. Cicero, what do you think?
Well, I think the thing is that for once, CBS has their finger on the pulse of the young people, as opposed to Viacom. And you know, just by calling them young people, it makes them sound old. But the fact is that content is moving away from broadcast television and cable television to streaming and on demand. And CBS All Access has found a home with Star Trek. You know, as the anchor store for, I think that was the metaphor that I used, the analogy that I used, the last time we got together, but that Star Trek is kind of the anchor store that is the mall that is CBS All Access. And, you know, Viacom is looking for a way to remain relevant. And one of the reasons that this is happening, I think, is so that CBS definitely wants to bring in, if people are coming are paying for CBS All Access for Star Trek, let's give them all the Star Trek. And then we can't give them all the Star Trek until Chris is able to watch Nemesis on CBS All Access. And he can't do that until Viacom and CBS.
Zaki, the idea of getting Star Trek all under one roof, do you think that should be kind of a justification for moving this in addition to everything else that CBS would have access to?
Yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, the bifurcation of the Star Trek rights has not been good for anyone. And you know, arguably, that's the biggest reason that the Kelvin series may have gotten, you know, strangled in the cradle, you know. And I don't buy into all the 25% stuff or whatever, all the conspiracy theories about how different it has to be or whatever, but just purely from a legal corporate point of view, you're depriving yourselves of assets, and by virtue of that, each side has less incentive to invest in each other's respective assets. So, yeah, you know, I think this is what I read in Variety or Hollywood Reporter, you know, making the comparison to the MCU, insofar as, you know, CBS is looking at what Disney's done with Marvel and how they've reacquired all those properties, and that's what they want to do with Star Trek, which makes sense because when you think about it, Star Trek was the MCU of its day.
Sure.
right? And so, you would watch an episode and then you go to the theater and everybody's wearing the new uniforms. You come back to the show, suddenly everyone's wearing the new uniforms. There was a real synchronicity that they have the opportunity to really light those fires again. So yeah, of course. I mean, the CBS Viacom split was one of the dumbest decisions for both sides. I mean, Paramount more than CBS, but each side is going to benefit. And what's weird is I'm very like bipolar about this because I don't like how we're in this age of vertical integration and where all these corporations are swallowing each other up. Yeah. But Star Trek gets to be together.
You've described my perspective in a nutshell. That's for sure. I mean, Rachel, you know this. I mean, how often have I talked your ear off when we're not on a podcast and we're just sitting on the couch and just like, don't treat Star Trek with enough respect.
Yes, many times.
Many times. What do you think about this idea? Because you're the one probably out of all of us who's the hippest as the youngest member of our panel.
So hip.
Well, I mean, you're using CBS All Access. You're one of the young folks that are flocking to it for the American version of Love Island.
No, I don't know, flocking, but yeah, I mean, they did say in a press release that they were pleased that people who are watching Love Island are quote unquote not CBS viewers, which I think means young.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
not collecting Social Security.
I guess that puts me in that demographic. Yeah, I mean, I share Zaki's sentiments where, like, I generally think the sort of blobbing together of giant media corporations is not good, and like I definitely sneered at a lot of people on social media who, when Disney bought Fox, were like, "Oh, the X-Men will be in the MCU."
Yeah, there were like, whiter.
I'm like, I think they're gonna kill movies. Like I think the movies are dead, but the X-Men in the MCU. So okay. So I don't really know as much about Viacom and CBS's properties to know what's going to die here, so that Star Trek can live.
Right.
But well,
something must.
Well, no, like I mean, when you think about it, it's like, okay, to get like the Fox properties in the MCU, like Disney just killed every Fox movie in production, didn't they?
I think they did, yeah.
Well, yeah. Well,
yeah,
I don't know
goodness.
what was in production, but well, not just superhero movies. They
killed all the other.
Yeah, they killed everything. So there's a lot of collateral damage, and it's like, what sort of good stuff was potentially killed for that, right. And so we can they can remake every single property that they've ever had, and so yeah, like I don't know, my instinct is that something here is gonna have to die, but if Star Trek can be invested in better, that's good. So silver lining.
There's some cold water for us to end the show on.
Capitalism.
Right. Well, so if I may, I will say that if this merger does go through, which it looks like it will, we have one person to thank for that.
Yeah,
and that is Les Moonves. Right. Well, yeah. Because he is an alleged philanderer. And I will say alleged because I really love Julie Chen. But because of that, he had to resign his position as head of CBS, and he was the big,
primary
person who was stopping. Yeah. He was the primary. Yes, he was the primary opposition for this merger. And he believed that CBS had, bigger and better groups with whom they could merge. than Viacom and Paramount, and didn't really see the unification of Star Trek as being a good enough reason to spend that money or to make the negotiations. And now that he's gone, things are moving at a pardon the pun, warp pace.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Les Ventress. Yep, exactly. Goodbye. Not just because of the philandering, but also because he clearly hasn't given a crap about Star Trek for most of the time that he's been in that position. Right. Not that those are equal crimes, obviously, but that's just what's been in my head.
I mean, you can trace the cancellation of Enterprise to him, can't you?
Goodbye. We don't need him anymore. But all right. Well, I think that's going to do it. We've covered quite a lot, and hopefully this is just the beginning. Star Trek's future is looking very bright, whatever forms it's going to take. There's still the unsettled mystery of a potential film that I don't think is going to happen, but that Quentin Tarantino can't stop talking about for some reason. Yeah, right.
Once upon a time in the Delta Quadrant. Well, then he even said something
recently about how, well, maybe if I did a Star Trek movie, it wouldn't count as my 10th movie. And I'm just like, screw off. Come on. I mean, it would count. If you direct a Star Trek movie, then that is going to be your... But whatever. That's not going to happen. Probably not worth mentioning. But thank you for everybody who came back aboard to Discovery Debrief to listen to this one. And we look forward to bringing more to you. But that's going to do it for episode number 44. Oh yes, please do.
And can I just say something actually before in the interim, I've on occasion while driving, I'll put on like various channels on YouTube and things that are they're like Star Trek focused, and what strikes me is there is such negativity out there, and it's people just love to complain, and they're so passionate about what they hate. And I look at this stuff and I can't stomach too many minutes of it because I'm just like, if you don't like it, just move on. Just find the thing you do. And, I've said this before, and I just want to say to you guys, you are my friends because of Star Trek. And that's what Star Trek is, or it should be. It's a thing. It's a universe we all get to share in. We get to spend time in. We get to talk about the fun times we had. And if you're not getting that out of it, then, maybe it's not for you anymore, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
But don't yuck other people's yum,
No, it's true. Hey, IDIC.
That's all. What should I say? Don't yuck anybody else's yum.
Yes.
Well, no, I mean, I think
I'm going to bring that back as much as I can.
You exemplify. I think everybody on this panel exemplifies the idea of wanting to start conversations as opposed to end them, and that's why I not only appreciate every chance I get to talk about this franchise that I love with you guys, but with the people who have picked us up and who engage us in those conversations too. We're really glad to have you, and we hope that you stick with us. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for episode number 44 of Discovery Debrief. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please like and follow us on our social media channels. And if you'd be so kind, we'd appreciate it if you wrote a review for the show on iTunes or Facebook. It only takes a minute, and we'll be happy to read your review on the air when it's posted. If you have any questions, you can follow the show on Twitter at DSC Debrief, where you can also find all of our individual Twitter handles. And feel free to send us questions through Twitter, our Facebook like page, or by emailing us at hailingfrequencies@discoverydebrief.com. Please be sure to set your courses for this feed for future episodes, and be sure to join us as we convene next time to discuss the increasingly bright future of those bold adventures into the final frontier. As always, though, until we meet again, please go boldly, my friends.